Boker Tov, Boker Or, Hag Sameach, Happy Easter, Ramadan Mubarak. We're checking the sounds. This is the first time we've done this in a really long time. So we're going to see if this microphone is working. And then we will begin.
Right up on it. Oh.
Are we here?
Ramadan Mubarak.
Yep.
It's working. Okay, now you turn it off. And now that it is exactly 9:30, we are welcoming you once again to our home.
Oh, excuse me.
Some of you joined us for the Psalms Project, where we offered 150 Psalms every morning except on Shabbat, during a difficult time in our nation's story. And we are still in difficult times, for different reasons, but still really difficult. So we thought, well, maybe we'll try it again. And this time, counting the Omer, which we did do last time.
Yeah.
Remember?
Mm-hmm.
The Omer is the period between Pesach and Shavuot, between Passover and the Feast of Weeks, Shavuot, when we receive the Torah. So it's 7 weeks of 7 days. And then on the 50th day, we have the climax of our story as a people. So once again, Boker Or, Boker Tov, good morning. We welcome you into our home on this Chag Pesach, on the second day of Passover, which is when we start counting the Omer.
That's when we start the
That
counting.
happens this year to be Easter Sunday. So
Crazy.
Happy Easter. And also it is just past the midway mark of Ramadan. So Ramadan Kareem, Ramadan Mubarak.
You know, last time when we counted, when we did the Psalms,
yeah,
there was also some strange convergence with Easter.
With Easter.
We ended. We had a
Easter.
Siyum on Easter, didn't we?
Yeah, we did. It was Easter.
Because that's
Easter
when we
Sunday.
ended.
We ended on
after
Easter.
Like 6 months.
That's right. And so it's right that we begin again.
Strange convergences. It's like we picked up right where we left off.
Yeah.
Except now we're doing the counting and the Song of Songs that's typically read during associated with Passover, and marking this time of transformation, this 50 gates of wisdom, we call it. Freedom from begins from Pesach, freedom from to our durable wisdom that we acquire on Shavuos, freedom for.
Right. So, it's this wonderful notion that in order to be free, you got to have a guidebook. You got to have a set of rules. There is no freedom without responsibility. There is no freedom, right? Without laws, without rules.
Yeah.
Right. So that's
So I'm going to
Torah.
read a piece. I'm going to read a little piece to introduce us.
The notion of the Omer that has the attributes.
Yeah, first I'm going to read a fanciful piece, and then we'll start with poetry, and we'll move to prose, as we're taught in the Haggadah. We begin the story with poetry, and we move toward prose.
Beautiful.
Counting. This is called Life Daily. Counting daily. Today is day 1 of the Omer. From the second day of Passover to the 50th day, which is Shavuot. Zman, transformation. The time of our transformation.
The possibility, right?
During the Omer period, we are preparing ourselves for the durable wisdom for the wedding. Also in Shavuot, we mark that as the wedding between God and Israel. Hello.
Sorry.
For the durable wisdom, the wedding, the gift of a guidebook, anyway. Until the wedding, we are hungry, let's call it, with expectation. Thus the Song of Songs, intoxicated with love and godliness. All days I am a vessel, a working out of potencies, energies, elementals. In particular, I am a daily elemental within a week of shifting elementals. Work me, O holy God, you have my attention. Day 1, in chesed, clean, purifying through learning. Eat something green.
Seder.
Find your gratitude bone. Make someone happy at home. Check in with this Shulamite woman. She will remind you are full with hunger. Amen.
Amen.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher קידשנו מצוותיו וציוונו על ספירת העומר. Hayom, Yom Echad LaOmer. Today is day 1 of the Omer asterisk. Pay attention to what happens during the days of the Sphira, the counting. Become aware that all you see and hear on each day is the activity of that Sphira, and that it can align you to God's blessed will. This is your spiritual alignment. This from Nachman, the Breslaver. The first week, the key is chesed. The Sphira is chesed. Chesed, love, giving, pure giving.
Yeah.
So I think we should start with a little. To lead a better life, I need my love to be here. Here, making each day of the year.
This is an Omer song.
Changing my life with a wave of the hand. Nobody can deny that there's something there. Running up my hands through her hair. Both of us thinking how good it can be. Somebody's speaking, but she doesn't know he's there. Everywhere.
Nice. That's definitely an Omer song.
Well, my voice
Counting the
isn't
days.
ready, you know what I'm saying?
That's okay. Slowly, we introduce, but even with the Omer, you could feel that we're introduced to that Shulamite woman. You know, the woman
Shulamite woman.
from Jerusalem,
Shulamite woman.
the suburbs of Jerusalem, who is going to gather us together and remind us of this first sensibility of chesed. And of course, that poem came from Rabbi Nachman of Bratslav, right? Who was, we know, was from Ukraine. That's
Buried in
his roots.
Uman.
In Ukraine. As was the Baal Shem Tov, as was the birth of Yiddish, as were many things that are complicated and part of the story of the Jewish people. So we have a preamble for Shir HaShirim. Now that we've counted this first glorious day of the Omer that has so many confluences, the last day of our Psalms project, the first day of the Omer, Easter, Ramadan, Passover, all of these convergences on this day, we begin also the study of Shir HaShirim.
So should we talk about what our sources are with Shir HaShirim a little bit?
Yeah, I think so. You know, let's say something about the title, because the title has nothing to do with the poem.
Right.
The title comes from something that was added, this, Shir HaShirim, Shir Shlomo. That first verse 1, not part of the poem, but maybe part of the what made us be able to include this fabulous poem into the canon of our Tanakh, of our Torah, of our sacred literature. So has nothing to do with Shlomo, really, right? Although his name is Peace.
King Solomon.
Has nothing to do with King Solomon, though
the king is mentioned.
The king is mentioned. We just don't know really what king? And this notion that it's Shir HaShirim, like Hakadosh Kodashim, like Malchei HaMalachim, this notion of the King of Kings, of the Holy of Holies. This is the song of songs. So it's not just Song of Songs, right? It is the song
the most,
of all the songs.
the
And
most.
the tradition is, right, that there were 10 songs given, and this is the highest of them
Also,
all.
so the tradition becomes that Shlomo was the author of the songs.
Right.
There's
Gives it yichus,
and the way we're going to approach it is a variety of songs in here.
Right.
Some of our sources is 23. Some of our sources, there's 8 chapters traditionally, but divided up much later by our scribes. But there's many songs integrated, kind of like folk poetry.
But 2 main voices, right? The 2 voices of the lovers.
Mm-hmm. So we consulted some interesting sources is kind of what we were looking at. And we divided the books up. So I found something really interesting that I had in my library. It was a long ago out of print commentary on a Song of Songs by Morris Jastrow Jr., who was the son of Marcus Jastrow, who was compiled the dictionary of the English dictionary that we use of the Talmud, the Targum, and the Midrashim, and it's a very useful book. He came to this country, and ended up in Philadelphia, wrote of Sholem actually, and then his son came over also, and his son was worked with him for 1 year. I'm sure there's a story there. And then resigned that position and took a position. This is Morris Jastrow Jr., who's the son of Marcus. I don't know why he's a junior and his father is a Marcus, but I don't know the story there. But he became a librarian at the University of Pennsylvania, chief librarian at the University of Pennsylvania. Did some really interesting scholarly work. This is the late 19th century. And he wrote a commentary on the Song of Songs. It's really completely voluminous and very interesting from that 19th century era of scholarship that was so deep in our tradition. So I had that book. Look at this. It's like
it's old. It's beautiful.
1920, this book was published, the one that I have even. So it is a kick. And it really has such great information. And of course, we have the Sanchino that we can always go to the Megillot. And then Susie.
I have the Art Scroll. So I have the Art Scroll, which has, some pretty traditional, very traditional, really sees this song as an allegory. It's all about God and Israel, all about God and Israel, all about, Israel as the whore, the prostitute, the unfaithful lover. That's us and God. And so we'll definitely use that. And I think really I have to use my friend Marcia Falk.
Oh, this is so wonderful.
Beautiful, really. She's such a wonderful poet. So we definitely recommend this. And the one that has her commentary in it. You can get a version of the Song of Songs by Marcia Falk with her commentary. It's really worthwhile to read that. And her beauty. She's a poet. So the beautiful poetry. There's also a lovely book called The Song of Songs by a husband and wife team.
Also wonderful.
Yeah, really well done. Beautifully done. The Song of Songs by Hannah and Ariel Bloch. And they really do kind of what we're trying to do here, really speak through this experience of the dynamic between the traditional allegory and the actual poem, the speaking of lovers.
It was early on allegorized because the poems themselves are so
steamy,
hot, steamy. Yeah. So they allegorized them in many different ways. The Christian world allegorized them in one way, and the Jewish world we allegorized them in another way. And there was some real prohibitions in the Talmud about not allegorizing them. Be careful. Don't read them as folk poetry, as secular poetry, but that's what it comes out. God's name is not mentioned.
There's no God mentioned in this book.
There's also in our tradition in the commentary an interesting progression. We link these three different texts, to authorship by King Solomon. So we had a way of which text was this text, Song of Songs and Proverbs and Kohelet, Ecclesiastes. And there's such different texts. So we had a way in our tradition of linking each text with a stage in Shlomo's life, the kind of wisdom of Shlomo's life. So the Song of Songs, depending on who's reading it, would be linked to his youth. It most obviously would be to his youth. The first inclination is this would be the work of a young person. But there's other opinions where the Song of Songs was the last, his last text that he gave over, which is also interesting, the last arc of his life. And Rashi has it in one place that it was the last text that he gave. And so Ecclesiastes, though, is usually linked with the last arc of his life, because in the Midrash Rabbah we have Kohelet, because Ecclesiastes is a kind of a tarnished optimism. It's you've lived a long time and you see the world the way it is, and it's a little dusty, and vanity of vanities. You see things for what they are in this last arc of our lives a little clearer than you did when you were younger.
That might be true.
That might be true.
So it might be a story, that a memory, although it's so present, and it's so. So the song is set in early spring, which is another connection to this time, right? It's not historic, not linked to history, right? It's linked to the natural world, which is important. It is linked to geography, though, the Shulamite. It is linked to that magical kind of place of Jerusalem, where the upper and the lower worlds come as close together as they can be. And the other thing is clearly these voices, they are not married. There's something outside of the box here, because they're not married, and there's no shame. There's no shame in this. There's no sin. There's no sin. There's plenty in the commentary, by the way, but there's no sin in the poem, right? In the Shir, no sin in the Shir. And also Eden, the I guess the most valued attribute here in the whole psalm is pleasure, and is, as you said, beauty. It's beauty and pleasure, and where beauty and pleasure kiss, where they come together.
Oh, we'll have to break out that song.
Yeah.
Kiss, kiss.
Kiss, kiss. Right?
What might people say?
Kiss, kiss.
Kiss, kiss.
Now, the other thing that I love, and that we'll hear again and again, is that the first words of this shir are a woman's words, an unmarried, or the memory of an unmarried woman who is very outspoken, who again has no shame, and some of the translations, you'll see some of the traditional translations have her behind a veil, but in the Hebrew there is no veil. She is not ashamed. She is not covered. She's very present. If we can say that the history of our people comes from the fathers and the tribes, the love poetry here comes from our mothers. And there's no tragedy here, right? It's interesting, right? In most love poetry, there's some tragic nature. No tragedy here, just love and pleasure, right? And there's no hierarchy. She's not boss of him, he's not boss of her. There's no hierarchy here. There's real equality, and nature is the mirror of the lovers, right?
What else I find interesting here is the third text that's linked with Shlomo.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Shlomo HaMelech is Proverbs.
Right.
And almost all the commentators agree that in that part of your life, the middle part of your life,
Mm-hmm.
when you're in process,
Yeah.
that's when you break out the Proverbs. You need that kind of guidance.
So,
But at the beginning
Yeah.
and at the end, it's towards the beginning of your arc and the last part of your arc, it's a different trip.
yeah.
It's not Proverbs is not your bread.
But I think you set me up for this. The last thing I wanted to say in introduction, and maybe we'll read a little or hear your
Well, let's at
poem.
least do the Shlomo.
Let me just tell you what Proverbs 30, 15, 19 says.
Oh, okay.
Sex is one of the wonders of the world.
Okay, that's it for a second here. You surprised me with that one, Susie.
It's in Proverbs. I found it.
Good for you.
Okay. Okay.
That's good.
Yeah.
Well,
There's so much more. There's
let's
just
do
so
one
much.
one
So a
piece
little
of
bit,
text.
we'll-
One piece. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah. No. I see. Each time we'll
We're
do a
getting to
There's
our
so
limit,
much
you know.
to say about this.
And
Yeah.
somebody's skin is tingling here. I just saw in the
Uh-oh.
commentary here, so that's a good thing.
Oh, I'm so glad some of our friends have found us. We weren't sure if we publicized this, but we're gonna every morning, 9:30, we will be here, and of course, you can catch it later too. It'll be on the CRC website.
We like the Kabbalah of the secrecy of our events. We kind of like that. Safun.
It's a foon. Oh my gosh, the hidden, like the matzah. But when it's revealed, watch out.
Magid rachatza motzi matza maharoh korech shulchan orech safun barech. Okay, so we got what comes after tzafun? I guess we'll just have to hit this. Barech.
This is the order of the Seder that's sung in the Sephardic melody from Salonika.
So we're gonna we'll leave the text till tomorrow.
Oh, let me just read. If you can just skip that first Shir HaShirim Asher L'Shlomo.
Let's talk about L'Shlomo.
So that's verse 1.
So much in a preposition. There are no lowly parts of speech.
Right. L'Shlomo.
Like Mizmor LeDavid.
So it's not so much Shlomo, King Solomon. It's L'Shalom, which is, where we began.
Yep.
We're on our way to peace.
And so much intimacy in that. Shlomo.
Yeah.
And L'Shlomo, it could be by the king, for the king, in praise of the king, in the Talmud, in honor of the king. So much in a preposition.
L'Shlomo, right.
From Rashi, Shlomo, in his name, to whom peace belongs. Shalom, Shlomo,
Nice.
to whom peace belongs. Like with the Psalms, we always like to, toward the end, we like to do a prayer for healing. Because part of these presentations or whatever, these part of our events, we're aware of the healing in our communities, in our concentric circles of healing in our circles, in our communities, in our country, in our world. The concentric hunger for healing.
Yeah.
So we always finish with a prayer for healing.
Healing for.
And then we'll do the prayer of the hands to close out.
So
And then I'll
healing
take
for
out the dogs.
Healing for individuals, healing for families, healing for communities, healing for our nation, healing for Ukraine and other places like Syria and Yemen, nations in Africa that are torn by war, healing for our planet, for Mother Earth.
Refuat nefesh, refuat haguf. For the healing of the spirit, the healing of the body, for those we know, for those we don't know. רפואת הנפש, רפואת הגוף. On my right, the angel Michael, on my left, the angel Gabriel. In front of me, the angel Uriel, Uriel, Uriel. Behind me, Raphael. Above my head, Shekhinah tail. Baruch atah Adonai Rofei HaCholim. Blessed are you, great healer. Amen.
Amen. Amen.
All
May
right.
it bring healing. May the learning that we do together bring healing. And so tomorrow we'll begin with verse 2, which we believe is the beginning, really, of the Shir HaShirim. We'll count the next day of the Omer. And we are going to end, I think, each time with the prayer of the hands.
We're going to close with a moment of quiet. Remembering all of our teachers, inspirations, influences, all our relations, our beloveds. Take your thumb now and run it up and down your heart line. Now take your hands and put them together against your chest like Anjali Mudra. Then take your left hand and set it within your right hand, as in the Zohar. Feel it on your chest. Feel your physical and spiritual union at your heart line. Spend a moment in gratitude for all that you have received, given, received. Hold your hands away from you now in a posture of blessing, palms out. Spread your fingers. Now turn your palms up like the 5-petaled rose, the opening intention of the Zohar, attitude of receiving. Drop your hands. Leave a moment for the silent expectation for peace. Starving for it. Peace of the near and peace of the far. The upper worlds and the lower worlds will find each other. Take a deep breath and say, Amen.
Amen. Amen. Thanks for joining us on this first day of the counting of the Omer, on this second day of Passover, on this holy day of Easter, on this second part of the month of Ramadan, Mubarak. And we'll meet again tomorrow morning with verse 2 and following of Shir HaShirim, as we count the second day of the Omer and go Lishlomo, Lishalom. Have a great day, everyone.